That's what she said.
Yeah, that's it.
Welcome, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second panel of the year. I'm super excited. We have some special guests with us today that we don't normally have. Just as a little plug, we have handouts outside, local resources that are available, some information that Christy Sigler has shared with us about how to support victims, and a pencil. So if you have questions for our panelists for the open Q&A portion, you can write them down while you're thinking about them while you're listening. It's really important that you sign in on that paper today. Partway through the Q&A, I'm going to put up a slide with a QR code. So if you're here for extra credit, that's the best way to get extra credit is to fill out that QR code. So be looking for that partway through the Q&A. I do want to just acknowledge that the things that we're going to be talking about today are they're heavy things. And statistically, it's pretty likely that some of you have experienced it yourself, or that you know somebody who has. Maybe you've witnessed some kind of violence in your home, in your relationships. And so I'm just going to encourage you to take care of yourself today. If you need to step outside for a minute, then you're free to do that. In just a few minutes, we're going to hear from somebody whose daughter was killed by her husband, and we'll hear a little bit about that story. So that might be particularly troubling for some of you. So when we get to April's Law, feel free to step out, go to the bathroom if you feel like that might be a problem for you. If you're attending virtually today, first of all, thank you for being here. You will be able to participate in the Q&A through the chat box, so please feel free to enter those questions anytime. I do ask that you keep your microphones and your cameras turned off, and you can pin our ASL video and turn on closed captionings via Zoom on your end. I have them also on the screen behind me. Although Zoom's less than perfect automated closed captionings is available for today's panels, I will also be correcting the captioning for a recording that I will send out after the event is over for anybody who would like it. Again, that QR code at the end is where you can request those corrected closed captionings. Let's see. So let's see here. I also wanted to let you all know that we do have an MTSU photographer here today. So if for any reason you don't feel comfortable being in photographs, please, what was your name? Andy. Please let Andy know. Okay. I also want to take just a moment and remember our colleague, Ashley McKenzie. This past year, Ashley McKenzie lost her life. She was a sociology professor here at MTSU, and she taught the violence in the family section in sociology. I teach it in human development and family science. So she was my colleague in educating our students and the public on these topics. In addition to being a beloved professor, she also contributed to research in the field of intimate partner violence and sexual violence. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our loss. Students and faculty alike will miss the vitality and the joy that she brought to our campus and our community. I also want to highlight a special guest that we have here today. In the spirit of lifting up voices of people in our community who have direct experience with family violence, our special guest speaker joining us via Zoom is Jamie Dickerson. Her daughter April was killed by her husband. Even though her death was incorrectly deemed a suicide, Jamie strove to find out the truth and championed a law in her daughter's name that allows families of victims, not just spouses, to challenge the cause of death in the state of Tennessee. We're going to watch a very short news clip about this story and then hear a few comments from Jamie before proceeding with our regularly scheduled panel.
The journey's been really long, but I see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Operation Crime and Justice tonight. An update now on a story Fox 17 News first brought you about a mid-state woman who cracked her own daughter's murder case, which Metro Police initially considered a suicide. State lawmakers are now considering a bill that would give parents like that mom the right to challenge suicide rulings. Fox 17 News' Karen Aguilar broke this original story for us. She's now live outside the Capitol after speaking exclusively to the victim's mother about this bill.
It's been an emotional 2 years and 7 months for Jamie Dickerson, from burying her own daughter to getting justice and now working on getting legislation passed to help other families not go through the same thing.
I didn't need to say goodbye.
It's been almost 2 years since Jamie Dickerson solved her own daughter's murder, April Holtz, which was first ruled as suicide. I spoke exclusively to her on Thursday after being the first to tell her story.
All of these things I'm doing, I feel like it's just like not my goodbye, it's my see you later, April.
Dickerson tells me she knew from the very beginning April's husband, Donovan Holt, killed her at their Antioch apartment in July 2023. She was found with a plastic bag on her head, taped around her neck.
My mama gut told me, no, something's not right.
Metro Police said April killed herself, but Dickerson dug through this investigation report and found Donovan's fingerprints were on the bag.
Which resulted in 2 hits to Donovan Holt.
Donovan then confessed to Dickerson. He was arrested. Dickerson faced challenges to get justice. Not only did police not believe her, the medical examiner couldn't reconsider April's manner of death. Under Tennessee law, if you were married, only spouses can reopen investigations. So Dickerson took that loophole to Senator London Millar. She filed a bill which would give parents the right to challenge suicide rulings.
It gives parents and spouses equal next of kin status so that a parent or spouse can open up the investigation.
For Dickerson, it's another way to honor April.
So when you find something that's faulty in a system, even though I can't bring back my daughter, I can help so many other families.
The legislation passed a committee on Tuesday. Dickerson will be testifying in front of lawmakers next. But it's still a process before the bill gets to the governor to sign. We'll keep you updated. Reporting in front of the Capitol, Karen Aguilar, Fox 17 News, your co-ed station.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you so much for joining us today. What would you like to share with us as someone who's championed this law? Can you unmute your mic, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this law has actually been passed now. So that is huge news. We had an 87-0 vote. I went and testified for the House this last 2 times that we had to go through because the Senate had already passed it. So that is now a law. And that just touches my heart in so many ways. I'm just praying that it will help so many other families in the future, that they're able to not have to fight to just get paperwork, to just have something reconsidered when you know something is wrong. There's so many things that our law and just our justice system needs to take into consideration when it comes to somebody's death. I really, really highly recommend that people that have any kind of domestic violent history that they can go through a mental health assessment, that there's courses that are mandatory for them to have to take. I also really want to push forward, and I might even put through another bill that and that there has to be the need for the 10 factors that need to be considered when there's a suicide considered as death. I mean, my daughter being found with 9 out of 10 of those factors, and the police to just disregard that fact is astonishing. And to know that if they would just go through this checklist and be able to see, hey, here's all these red flags, because in my opinion, there's so many times when we don't seem to understand that domestic violence does not always show as bruises. It is not shown all the time on the body, on the exterior. A lot of the times it's financial abuse, it's emotional abuse, it's just the narcissism that happens within the relationship, and that leads up to something that can be so much greater. And so when somebody wants to leave in a domestic violent relationship, my number one tip is to leave quickly and quietly. Don't say a word. You don't even need to make your plans and arrangements. Just get out. Your safety is more important than your things. And so I am a big advocate for making sure that I can speak and help other women, men. People always disregard the fact that men are also involved in this domestic violent um, problem that we have. I mean, 1 in 3 females and 1 in 20 males in a murder are actually killed by their partner. And that is huge. And so we need to start to make sure that we're holding people accountable that are showing signs of domestic abuse way prior to waiting for them to actually take the life of somebody.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I think it's really important that we hear directly people's stories, what we can learn from your situation. Thank you so much for the work that you've done to pass this bill to help future victims of domestic violence, no matter who they are, and their family members find justice. We really appreciate you sharing your story. I hope you will stay around. If people in the audience have questions, would you be willing to take those questions at the end of the panel?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
So before we get to our regularly scheduled panel, I would like to take a moment to thank the very generous sponsors that we have from across MTSU, the Tennessee Success and Innovation Funding, the College of Liberal Arts and Interdisciplinary Studies Initiatives, which offers an interdisciplinary minor in gerontology to explore multiple aspects of aging and prepare students for a growing demand for professionals across healthcare, social work, public policy. The College of Liberal Arts also has a career readiness minor, which offers hands-on resume building, learning opportunities to develop core competencies that are sought by modern employers, like critical thinking, intercultural communication, and ethical leadership. Other sponsors are MTSU Engage, the Department of Human Sciences, the Honors College, the Physician Assistant Studies Program, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, the Department of Elementary and Special Education, MTSU Student Government Association and Campus Nonviolence Committee through the Tina Stewart Nonviolence Grant, Department of Political and Global Affairs, my program, the Human Development and Family Science Program, and our ASL interpreter has been brought to us by the College of Behavioral and Health Sciences College in appreciation for the Speech Language Pathology and Audiology program. So now I would like to introduce to you our illustrious panels. I mean, what a fantastic group of folks that we have here today. I'll start with Erica Downing. She is an MTSU graduate. She started as a sexual assault volunteer advocate at Murfreesboro Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center. And my understanding is you guys are always looking for more advocates in those roles. Absolutely. So if this is something you're interested in volunteering for, get with Erica. She is now the director of the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center. I'm just going to be sharing some abbreviated bios, but if you use that QR code up in the top, you can see links, you can read more about them. So I encourage you to do that. Dr. Lauren Pinkston is the former president of Kindred Exchange, a nonprofit focused on supporting entrepreneurs and expanding jobs in the global South. She's lived in Southeast Asia, researching the human trafficking crisis and starting businesses to employ survivors. She has consulted for anti-trafficking organizations and small business startups, helping them institute trauma policies in their healing-centered workplaces. Kat Polsonelli is an intimate partner violence survivor, sought-after speaker, and best-selling co-author and host of Real Chat with Kat, a globally ranked podcast. She speaks with raw honesty about the invisible scars that linger long after abuse ends. Kat provides practical tools and a deeper understanding to students, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, and those who support survivors. And she just recently did a TED Talk here in Murfreesboro. When is it coming out? Do we know?
You have to wait 30 to 45 days.
Okay, maybe like this summer.
I know.
Stay tuned, guys. All right, next is Detective Tommy Roberts. He is currently the sexual assault and domestic violence stalking detective with the MTSU Police Department. He retired from a 25-year career at Murfreesboro Police Department, where he spent 15 years as a founding member and detective for the MPD Special Victims Unit and domestic violence detective. And my understanding is you have like over 1,000 cases of experience in various forms of violence, like elder abuse, child abuse, something like that. It's a lot. Yep. I know you counted all of them, right? Okay, and then I am so excited to introduce Dr. Barbara Scales, newly minted, was it PhD or EDD? EDD. She is the Executive Director of Organizational Compliance and Enrichment at Motlow State Community College and is the former director of the June Anderson Center here at MTSU. She is a newly minted EDD. Her dissertation was a mixed method study on how generation, cohort, and gender were related to workplace sexual harassment attitudes and prevention and intervention efforts. Christy Sigler also began practicing law in 2006. She chose to focus on children, parents, and grandparents in cases involving abuse, neglect, custody, termination of parental rights, adoption, and delinquency. She's now our Title IX and Title VI coordinator here at MTSU and serves as assistant to the president for institutional equity and compliance. So it's really good for students to get to know her as the person who runs that office. So before I answer questions, I'm just going to politely remind all of our panelists to take turns speaking so our ASL interpreter can do her job as effectively as possible. And we're going to start with Kat. Can you start us off talking about what are some of the signs of violence and abuse, either to know that you yourself might be in an abusive relationship or signs that maybe someone you know might be in an abusive relationship?
Absolutely. Let me scoot this forward.
Yes,
I'm gonna
please
try to
scoot
talk,
your mics up.
I'm going to try to talk slow so that she can get me. Okay, so thank you guys so much for being here. This is one of my favorite questions to answer, and I kind of want to follow up with what was being talked about a minute ago in regards to the signs of what we consider violence and abuse. So a lot of the times, and a lot of people that I speak with even today, with all the social media and avenues of resources that we have, when you start saying domestic violence or abuse, immediately people go to physical. And what I really like to drive home is that there are so many other different avenues of abuse that are happening simultaneously. And this is where I think that being able to identify if you are in a relationship like that or someone that you know might be in a relationship with that is not going to necessarily be the big, huge thing. It's not necessarily going to be the black eye or the bruises that you see. If it's you personally and you think or are beginning to think that way, it is probably because your significant other that you are with is always telling you what to do. Or every time you have an opinion, they are backtracking your opinion. Or maybe you have a lot of conversations where no matter what you say, it's never said correctly. And you get to the point to where you start questioning the conversations and the incidents. Is that really how that happened? Did I really say that? Did I really respond that way? Am I really the hateful person? These are the small, subtle signs that I want people to be aware of because this is where things begin. For my relationship specifically, I can tell you guys that I had no physical issues until year 3. And I was in my relationship for 10 years. The first 2.5 years were spent giving me all of the love that I could ever want, telling me everything to agree with my dreams. And then it became the small, subtle signs of how can I create control. And it went from getting me away from my family because my parents became the issue all of a sudden to, hey, why don't you stay longer with me on your lunch break? It's okay if you're late for work, which caused me to lose my job. So it's these kinds of things that we don't attribute to the other person. We put back on ourselves to say, oh, well, it's my fault, or I could have done this better. And when you start doing that in a relationship all the time, I strongly suggest using that as a cue to take a step back, because that is what people are doing in a lot of these situations. Yes, there are some that are very physical in an instance, but in a lot of cases, it's a slow undertone of control and separation and isolation and making you feel like you don't even know who you are that starts with those signs. And you'll also notice that with someone you might be talking with, maybe someone that you have that is very outgoing. I was one of those people. All of a sudden, never could go anywhere. There was always an excuse why I couldn't go. Or if they said something about my ex, I was like, oh, no, it's because of this. Where you might notice that they're always constantly pushing it off. Those are the things to be aware of. And it's not in a way of I see what he's doing to you, and that's wrong, because really you're just repeating what that individual is saying to them, which isn't helpful, but it's opening up the means of communications and asking questions of, does that sound right to you? Do you feel like you deserve that? And things like that to allow someone to open up, which then creates a space for more talking about it and stuff like that.
Thanks so much, Kat. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move to our next question and see if Erica would like to elaborate a little bit. So Erica, is there anything you want to add in terms of like signs of abuse that people need to be looking for? And then if they do notice something is going on and they decide that they want to do something about it, what are those reporting processes like? What are the resources available? What happens on the back end?
I don't know that there's much that I can add to what Kat discussed. It's really looks different in every single relationship. And it can be something that's very gradual, that you almost believe is normal until someone else kind of helps you unpack what that looks like. We use the power control wheel quite a bit in our office, and we see that kind of as an aha moment for a lot of the survivors that we work with, because when you're in that moment, you think you're the only one that's experienced that tactic or that behavior. And then you can look at a wheel and say, oh my gosh, I've experienced this, I've experienced that. And it's not just something isolated. It's now like, this is not normal behavior. And other people have experienced this, and experts have studied this, and they have figured out some of these tactics and behaviors, and you can actually see it in black and white. And sometimes that's when the reality hits, because we may not always realize that we're in those dangerous relationships until maybe it's too late. But for our end, what it looks like when somebody does come forward to report, and that may be that they didn't report to law enforcement, maybe they decided to come into our office and just speak with an advocate, just maybe kind of dipping our toes in the waters to figure out what we want our next steps to be. And so sitting down with an advocate and kind of unpacking the trauma they've experienced, the violence they've experienced, and then help them navigate what that could potentially look like. Is that filing an order of protection? Is that speaking to a counselor? Is that our emergency safe shelter, kind of unpacking what that could look like? And then possibly, if they feel comfortable with reporting to law enforcement, then we're contacting an officer to come out to our office to file a police report. Because I think that's a little less intimidating than going into police department or the sheriff's department. And our officers are willing to do that every day of the week. I feel like I see at least 2 officers a day from our Police Department in my office, because they're wanting to make sure that the victim or survivor is getting access to the resources that they need, that they've asked for. So a lot of our conversations start out with, well, law enforcement gave me this yellow sheet of paper. And for us, that means it's the victim's rights information. So there's been an arrest or there's been a police report made, and they're making that initial kind of referral to us. So most of our referrals actually do come with through law enforcement. They don't have to. We get a lot of self-referrals, a lot of family members that are calling and saying, I think that my daughter is in a domestic violence situation. How do I best help them navigate the situation? And really sitting there in that moment when somebody decides to disclose to you, the most powerful way is how you respond. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't believe them, if you dismiss them, if you victim blame and shame them, it's game over, because it makes it so harder for them to come forward and talk to a complete stranger, an advocate in my office, much less reach out to law enforcement and say, this is what I've experienced, because that abuser or perpetrator has told them, go ahead and call law enforcement. They're not going to believe you. And so, again, it's just so important of how you respond when somebody does disclose, and then actually sitting down and actively listening when someone actually discloses and help them figure out what their next steps are. To me as an advocate, the way that we can actually sit down with a survivor and show them kind of the strength that they have that they forgot that they had, because they have been isolated and manipulated to think that they can't do anything better than what they have. No one else will ever love you. No one else will put up with you. You are lucky that you have me. All of those things are playing in their head. And so for me, I'm able to flip that mirror around and say, I know what you were told, but let me show you how truly special you are and how you have the choices, you matter, and you are supported in our office. And so for us, I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do as an advocate. And then also work in tandem with law enforcement of helping them feel a little bit more comfortable with law enforcement. Now, I'm married to law enforcement, so I'm very comfortable with law enforcement. But I know that if I was sexually assaulted or if I'd experienced domestic violence, I may be a little uncomfortable with a male officer coming in and speaking with me. So the fact that, I have someone with me to support me through that conversation is beneficial because it makes it a little bit less scary. Those walls kind of start, crumbling down a little bit. And so, I feel like we have a really good relationship with law enforcement here in Rutherford County. I have found in my experience that they're very responsive to the needs of our survivors. They may feel uncomfortable disclosing some of the information that they've been told, but we've always had a very good relationship, and I'm thankful to Tommy the way that with his service at Murfreesboro Police Department and at MTSU, that he's able to help survivors navigate those situations and to make sure that they get in contact with us and make sure that they know where those resources are, because sometimes in a situation when you're in trauma, you don't know where to go and you don't know where to turn, and so you actually kind of need to help guide you to the right direction, and then kind of leave it at the door and let someone take those next steps. But, our survivors are the experts in their own situation. They know their abuser better than we do. And so we are walking alongside them through the process, whatever that may look like. So I always tell them they're the driver of the bus. I'm here to do whatever it is that you ask me to do. And at any time in the process, you decide, maybe this is not the right thing for me right now. Maybe I need to think about it. Maybe I'm just not ready. That's okay. That door is always open. That's why we have crisis lines that are available 24/7 for survivors, because you never know when that trauma is going to hit, and that you need to actually talk to someone and kind of unpack what you've just experienced. And those are some of the most rewarding conversations that you can ever have with a survivor, is kind of helping them unpack what that looks like and actually show them that they have the strength to walk through those doors and actually make a different choice. And it's hopefully just a situation that doesn't define who they are, and we can kind of help them see the other end of that, because healing is not linear, and sometimes we all need help to get to the other side. So that healing and that support is a huge part of that journey.
Before we hear from Tommy about law enforcement's engagement, I just wanted to ask Erica to share a little bit with us about what a sexual assault nurse examiner is, because we're focusing a lot on intimate partner violence, but sexual assault is something also that happens and you guys have services for.
Yes, absolutely. So a sexual assault nurse examiner is a nurse that has been specially trained to collect forensic evidence. So they are a nurse that is either an RN or a PRN that has been a nurse for at least 2 years, and they've gone through specialized training to collect that forensic evidence. So when somebody reports for a sexual assault, either to our office or Ascension St. Thomas Rutherford here in Murfreesboro, a nurse that has been trained to collect that evidence actually comes in to do that exam. So during that exam, the nurse is present, and also one of our advocates is present as well. So we are there solely to support the survivor during that exam. That exam can be anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, and that nurse is doing as little evasive collection that they need to in order to collect the evidence that's needed. So it's guided by questions of what happened during that sexual assault, to make sure that they're collecting where that evidence could be stored within our bodies. After that exam is completed, then one of our advocates who has been present during that exam will make sure that they have access to all of our resources, all of our referrals, and really giving them some information of how to unpack what they just experienced. So what does the aftermath of trauma looks like? How to get in contact with the district attorney's office if they decide to report to law enforcement and go through prosecution. How to contact law enforcement, what their victims' rights are as well. All of that is very confusing, and when you're in trauma, we understand that you're not retaining half of the things that we just advised you. So That's why we give you paperwork in writing, so it's something you can go back to and look at later on. We also have an advocate that follows up within a couple of days. Hopefully, they've gotten some sleep, and so we can kind of start that process of helping them unpack. Anyone who's experienced a sexual assault, we always recommend counseling services, because the sad reality is the first time that somebody reports for a sexual assault exam, that's usually not the first time they've been sexually assaulted. It's typically multiple sexual assaults before they've actually felt comfortable in coming forward to actually have that exam. Or there's a history of domestic violence. So there's a lot of trauma and violence in their past that has not been addressed. And so it's very beneficial to talk to someone who has that knowledge, expertise of counseling, to kind of figure out what does that roadmap look like for healing. And if someone doesn't feel comfortable with talking to a counselor, do you have a support person? Do you have a family member that you can tell the down and dirty to, and they're a safe place for you, and they're helping you navigate that situation? Because survivors are constantly looking for a safe place to disclose. And so again, that's why it's so important of how you respond to that disclosure, because if you're dismissive, you're no longer a safe person. And that is usually someone they will cut out of their life, because you are no longer a safe person, and we are traveling the planet to find those people that are safe for us to disclose. So that's why it's so important, again, of how you respond to that disclosure, and again, not to victim blame and shame when someone comes forward.
Thank you, Erica. Tommy, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about what law enforcement's response is to some of these cases. What is that like? What do we need to know?
First of all, let me touch on what Erica stated.
Oh, sorry. Can you move your mic up just a little bit? Here we go. Thank you.
Test 1, 2. Can you hear me?
Is it working? I think so.
Working there, Emmy?
Yeah, that's good. I can hear in the speaker.
First of all, what she talked about the sex assault kit. One thing that a victim can do, obviously, I'm going to talk from a law enforcement standpoint, and we like evidence. We like good evidence. And if someone is sexually assaulted and they don't feel like reporting it to the police, it's good to go ahead and get that evidence so you can go have a sex assault kit done, and it can be done anonymously. Okay? So always keep that in mind. And the sex assault kits are important. We may not find DNA. I know you watch TV shows, and that's the most important thing. But there are other things, and I've been in 32 trials in my law enforcement career, and I was like number one for the longest. Most things don't go to trial. So, and these lawyers will check, well, was a sex assault kit done? And you have to be able to say, yes, it was done. You don't have to, but it works out better if the sex assault kit is done at some point. As far as responding to domestics, stalking, and sex assaults, I'm going to break that down. Stalkings and sex assaults, a lot of times, or really most of the time, are reported. They're not like immediately reported. Some of them may be reported maybe an hour or two later. A lot of times that's at the police station, or they've gone to a friend's house. They've told the friend, "Hey, I was just raped or sexually assaulted," and the police respond there. Domestics, when outside of what Erica said about somebody showing up at the domestic violence center, most of our response is right on the scene. Okay, and obviously you want to be safe. Safety is always an issue, because by the time you get there, whoever called, it could have been a neighbor, and neither one of the parties called. All right, it could have been the person being assaulted. It's kind of died down now. You've got to the scene. You don't know this yet, but the perp is just being as cool as a cucumber, just as nice as they can be. And I don't know how many times I've responded, especially when I was in patrol, because the patrol is the one that typically responds. That's the first thing. It's typically a man. The first thing that the man says is, "She's crazy as hell." Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a go-to line for man. That's a crazy bitch. She's crazy as hell. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Mm-hmm. And you gotta say, well, I'm gonna need to talk to people. Raise your hand if you think a lot of times when you meet the victim, they don't really want to share a lot with you at that point. You think they do? Yeah, okay. They may not. Or they can be talking, they can be so emotional and mad that if you're not trained on these things as officer, you might start believing the guy. Maybe she is crazy. You can't do that. Okay? You got to remember they took the guts to call, and so this wasn't the first time that has happened. All right? Unlike any other aspect of law enforcement, I could pull someone over, find a little bit of weed on them. Up, shame on you. I'll take that. Be careful. If I catch you again, I'm going to have to take you to jail, write you up. Domestic law isn't like that. If there is a primary aggressor, somebody goes to jail. And from the state Supreme Court all the way to the United States Supreme Court, these arrests stand up. They'll try to do false arrests and all that. You're really backed as an officer. It's the one aspect of law enforcement where you can get in trouble for what you don't do as opposed to what you do. Okay? So if there's a primary aggressor, the officer is obligated by Tennessee law, and I'm sure every other state in the union, to make an arrest. Okay? From there, obviously, you separate the parties. You get each one of them, get to each one of them story. You determine if there's a primary aggressor. The abuser, the one that did the assaulting, goes to jail, and they get. It used to be a 12-hour, but now is it a 24-hour hold?
It's still a 12-hour hold on a domestic violence arrest, but if it's an aggravated domestic assault, then that is a 24-hour hold. That can be waived by the commissioner, but our commissioners in Rutherford County do not waive that 24-hour hold. Also now there is a law where if you're charged with aggravated domestic assault, a GPS device is installed on the perpetrator or the abuser. And so they maintain that device until the judge removes that as part of their bond conditions.
And that's very important. She mentioned something about the strangulation is huge, and it's not choking. Choking's when you take a bite of a hamburger. That's choking. Somebody puts their hands or arms or legs or anything close to that neck region, they're trying to strangle you, and that is charged as a felony. That's an aggravated assault, and that's a very serious thing. There was a study done where they went to federal prisons and state prisons. People that were serving life or on death row for committing murder, and it was a very short survey. They just asked the survey, not the reason why you're in jail here for the murder, but in your past, have you ever strangled anybody? 87% of them said yes. So you figure it's probably higher than that. The other ones probably they just wake up and lie. So if somebody is strangling you, that's an issue. So get some help. She mentioned the yellow sheet of paper. Every officer will give a domestic violence rights form to the victim. At the city, the detective would follow up, and he would actually go over that form with them and make sure they understood it. If they needed any help, I wish I'd have brought one, but I didn't. From there, we got great services in regards to Erica's staff, the advocates that will be with them in court, will answer questions. So we're really lucky here. And if you're an MTSU student, you even have enhanced resources because they got things on campus that can help you out if you're ever part of a domestic. But two issues: control and jealousy. Here lately, that's what I've been finding, a huge spike in our domestics. It's let me see your phone. Who'd you talk to? Where you been? Those are bad, man. Who wants to be in a relationship like that? I mean, come on now. You just and if you think about it, if you're in a relationship and you ask yourself, would I want my daughter to be in this same exact relationship? And if the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't be either. Okay? So that's one thing. Now I'll move on to stalking, because stalking is totally different. We usually don't get stalkings reported for a while. Okay? It's usually that's someone that's either showed up at the police department or called sometime later, and it's a basic investigative follow-up. And you have to determine the difference between harassment and stalking, because there's some slight differences on it. One of the most intense stalking cases I've ever worked happened right here while I was an MTSU detective. If any of you want to look up Daniel Green, say Daniel Green, Murfreesboro, right here, he made it. That one was so intense, and I'll briefly run it down for you. Basically, I had a young lady from Ethiopia. And she started getting these pictures of her with her boyfriend. She was dating a guy in medical school at Vanderbilt together, and from an untraceable number. Okay, and then she would get pictures of her drinking coffee in a bookstore, reading a book, from an untraceable number. So I asked her to come by, and well, it really got brought on because two people showed up at her office. She also worked here at MTSU as a grad student. Two people showed up at MTSU, identified themselves as police officers, and said, "We need to take your phone." And she's like, "Think about it. You're from Ethiopia. You don't. I mean, it's." So they take her phone, walk off with it. She catches Daniel Green, who happens to be her boss, and he pretends he don't know what's going on. So now she's nervous of everything. She's nervous of the guy that the doctor. She don't know who's doing all these things. I said, somebody has to know where you're at all the time. You mind if we search your car? So we bring her car over, raised it up, bam, found the tracking device. Did a search warrant on the tracking device, got the date that it was registered. Well, the address came back to Daniel Green. Went there and looked at it, and it had a little box truck. And he had asked her to work on a Saturday. And she thought, well, that's unusual, but she came on in. And the reason he wanted to do that is because there was no other people in the parking lot, and you see him drive up and climb under that car and put the tracking device on it. All right. And anyway, the one thing I don't like is all that's misdemeanors. And I wish there were stricter laws for stalking. And you can get the aggravated, and especially aggravated that upgrades it, but the initial one isn't. But what we got the felony on him is, after I arrested him, he calls his cousin in Mississippi to call the people with the tracking device to get rid of all that information. And so I called that cousin, identified myself. He was helpful. He goes, man, I don't know why. He just called me and asked me to do it, so I did it. And the only reason I know he did is because the tracking device people were very police friendly, and they called me and said, man, somebody called and asked us to. So we got to charge him with tampering with evidence too. So we did get the one felony charge. But every night during that investigation, and I don't know how long it went on for, 60 days or so, she lived, I believe, in Laverne. When she parked her car in the driveway, she would call me and just wanted me to stay on the phone with her till she got in. Think about how miserable that is, and just causing fear in you. And real quickly, responding to a sex assault, you got your sexual battery, which is no penetration. Rape is any penetration, and ever so slight. It doesn't have to. That's your penetration, but evidence of the utmost importance. Most people don't report in a timely manner, and selfishly, I wish they would, because we got that evidence right there. And if they do agree to do the sex assault kit, I don't try to get a lot of information from them there unless it's kind of a stranger situation, which are rare, but they have happened, just so we could put a bolo out. Ask them a few basic questions, say, hey, let these nurses take care of you, because we got some great sane nurses, and then in a day or two, I'll do a follow-up interview with them to get more detailed information. Because do you think their story changes just a little bit from the first time I talked to them to the second? Of course it does, and that's normal. You start recalling things, or I wish I'd have told him this, things like that. We got prosecutors with the DEA's office that specialize. Sarah Davis, Dana.
Minor.
I would have got it. I'm not that old. Yeah, Dana Minor, Allison Abbott, very good prosecutors, sex assault and rape situations. But same thing. And before I'll wrap it up with this, because Eric pointed on it. We have, when you work in the city, you get what we call frequent flyers for domestics. Like you'll be in your patrol car and you get dispatched to this same old house that's having domestics. Same one. And you kind of become frustrated. I train my officers. I try to say, don't do that. You gotta, and our response is, no matter what we think of the person that may be abusing them, it's easy for us to say, why don't you leave that person? Why don't you get him out of here? we got to keep in mind that they actually may know good things about it. Okay? So you always got to keep that in mind as law enforcement, that we got an opinion of them, and it's not the same as what the victim may have. Okay? But you're also there for the victim, and nobody deserves to, be in a relationship where you're constantly scared, constantly afraid your partner's going to get mad, and constantly afraid of another assault.
All right, I'm going to say let's do let's budget 20 more minutes for our next three panelists to tap into a few questions. I'd like to go to Christy and then Barbara next. If you guys can elaborate a little bit on what university responses and or recommendations y'all have for how to best support people who are telling us that they've experienced one or more of these kinds of violence, recommendations for do's and don'ts of support and intervention. I'll start with Christy and then move to Barbara.
Sure. So as Dr. Oldham mentioned in the beginning, I lead the office. It's changed its name. Mm-hmm. It's no longer Institutional Equity and Compliance. We're now Civil Rights Compliance. But we have 2 full-time investigators. That's all they do is investigate these cases. And so when someone comes forward, I meet with them first, find out what the nature of the problem is, what policy it might fall under, because policies are how we take all of the laws and rules and regulations and cobble them together into a system that everyone can use to understand expectations at the university, right? And policies are what drive our investigations. So if someone wants an investigation, then I'll go ahead and match them up with an investigator. That process gets started. I think it's important, though, for everyone to know that investigations are not required. You absolutely can come forward to our office and seek help through other mechanisms. We have connections to various resources. I had somebody yesterday who called because they had a problem and needed assistance with their courses. They were kind of falling behind in some classes. I'm able to reach out to those faculty members and say, look, they're working with our office on an issue. Can you give them extra time to complete their assignments? We can get people reassigned to a different dorm room. We can assign people to different jobs around campus. So there are lots of other things we can do besides just move forward with an investigation. As far as how best to approach a situation where you feel like somebody might be experiencing this kind of harm, I really want to emphasize, this person has been through trauma, and that messes with your ability to think straight. And so it might be really helpful for them to have somebody like you who can say, I know where to get help. Let's go online and submit something through the portal, or let's make a call to Civil Rights Compliance or to the Domestic Violence Center. You don't have to go through the university. We actually have a network in Rutherford County called the Sexual Assault Response Team that includes personnel from MTSU, the hospitals, the Domestic Violence Center, various law enforcement agencies, and we all work together to make sure that people get whatever support it is that they need when they need it. So keep in mind, that trauma aspect of things, and like Erica was saying, don't be judgmental in your approach to someone. If you come at them and say, well, you should have left a long time ago, you've automatically turned that person off to anything else that you might have to say. And so it's really important to approach non-judgmentally. And I believe, Dr. Oldham, you said that you have the resource page.
I think it's an older version, but there are copies out there.
There are some tips on how to engage with someone who you feel like has experienced this kind of harm. So I encourage you to look at those tips. I won't take too much time talking about it, but one thing that's really important that I want to emphasize is even if someone has been drinking or using drugs, or they wore something scantily clad, it does not give another human being the right to violate them. They are not in trouble for those things. We will not pursue charges against them for having used drugs or whatever. So reassure the person that you're talking to that those things can be shared with us without fear of prosecution for those aspects. I'll turn it over to Barbara.
So I do the exact same thing that she does at another institution. So I'm not going to even touch that because she did it beautifully, right? But I do want to say, look at your neighbor and say, be the friend. Be the friend. Be that friend. Because I think it's so important that, me and Cassandra over here, we knew Amy. I mean, we knew April. We know them well. Matter of fact, we went to the same ministry for a long time, and so she worked with her and the children. So we know them well. So we were both trying not to tear up too much when we were listening to that story because we know. So I say that to say, be the friend. It's so crucial that you be the friend, because I sometimes sit and think like, did I miss something? Right? Did I miss something that I should have noticed? And it's so easy for me to think back on it now, but did I miss something in that moment that I could have said, wow, should I have done something? So don't neglect that gut feeling. And there's so many things that you can do to do that. And so, if you don't want to directly get involved and be like, what's happening, what's going on, document the things that you see. And then in time, submit to them, this is what I'm seeing. Do you want me to go with you to report what I'm seeing? Is there something so be the friend. Also, when it talks about being advocate and supporting that individual, it can also look like, it might not be directly doing it at that moment, but it may be, is there a program that I can get involved with that I can now, as a student that you're a part of, can I go and now get more education from this agency? Can I be a volunteer for this agency? Can I come to programs like this? If you're a student and you want to help put on a student programming, is there a student program that I can be to bring awareness to the situation? Individually we can do so much to bring awareness to this piece. That's what advocacy and support looks like. And you can do just like Jamie did on a bigger level and go talk to the legislature and become a bill, but there's so many other things that you can do to be an advocate. I want to encourage you. Your voice matters more than anything. And so people are going, you have TikTok right there, you have Insta, you have all of those things right there. Let your voice be heard on this matter, because it matters. And your voice matters. So if you can bring any type of advocacy and support to this, please do so. Because it's so important to prevent things like what Jamie just talked about happening. You be that voice.
If I could add one thing, on documentation, there is an app called Incident Genie that is really good. Again, that's Incident Genie. It allows you to take photographs, pen map dots, take notes, all the different aspects that you might need to document problems that someone is experiencing. And it's free. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I want to say, feel free to add to what our other panelists have said as you like, and if you're willing to also speak on maybe some bigger level policy or cultural changes that you think need to be made in order to prevent or intervene in terms of violence. So I'll just let you speak on what you think is most important.
Thanks. No need to add, everyone's done such a beautiful job, and I do love, my brain hangs out in the policy space a lot, so if you guys have a pencil or if you're taking notes on your phone, I'm going to give you a quick and dirty list. A quick and dirty list of what I think needs to happen right now in the state of Tennessee and federally to be able to protect children, to protect adults and victims of assault and violence. Number one, talk therapy is the most invasive form of therapy that exists. when we are dealing with individuals who have experienced trauma. And this may not be something we talk about a lot, but there are incredible modalities like neurofeedback, brain spotting, hypnotic therapy is great for victims of complex traumas. So we need to make those more accessible, because for neurofeedback, as one example, it costs about $2,000 per month out of pocket, and insurance is not covering that. So this needs to be addressed, and we can employ that in our correction systems immediately. Number two, we have to address gun reform. Because it is now the #1 killer of children in Tennessee. This is a public health crisis, and it surpassed the number of deaths in car accidents in 2019 for kids. So this is a major issue. I'm not talking about attacking the Second Amendment. I've lived in a communist country, so I know what happens when we don't have those protections. But making sure that we have safe storage laws in Tennessee, because victims of domestic violence are also victims of gun violence, and we need to keep that in mind. If someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, I'm not necessarily a proponent of sending a law enforcement officer into a home as part of a red flag law to remove guns, but to have a safety storage box at a fire hall where the family can take those weapons and just surrender them for 60 days so that they feel safer would be very helpful. We need court-appointed psychologists, especially in family court. In issues of domestic violence, we need psychologists in the room to help our judges to understand when there is narcissism at play, when there are issues that may not be picked up on in a short interaction, because as you guys have already spoken to, abusers are great at psychological abuse and manipulation, and a judge may not pick up on that immediately. We need expungement pathways for victims of domestic abuse. So often, someone who is a victim of a crime is also a perpetrator of a crime, but they were forced into that criminal activity. And so they won't report that they are a victim because they are also going to be convicted of a crime, and they're afraid of that. And we don't have good expungement pathways right now for victims of those types of crimes. To talk about DCS for a little bit. In the state of Tennessee, our DCS workers are exhausted because they are working on salaries and not on shifts. And they have a short window of amount of time that they have to get across 11 counties to respond to cases. That has got to change. We need protection orders to change. If you want a protective order, thank you for all the affirmation. If you want to be protected from someone who is assaulting you, you have to face them in a courtroom with a judge often, and who wants to see their perpetrator, right? Like, we have to fix that. We need more healing-centered workplaces, but I'll go talk to the business school about this. I can say from a positive standpoint that we do now have a domestic abuse registry. So if someone is a repeat offender of a domestic abuse, that is now on a registry. So I'm thankful for that. At the federal level, last two things. If you are on a child abuse registry or a sex abuse registry in the United States, that is not indicated on your passport. And if I could take you guys down the streets that I have been in Thailand and in Uganda, and show you what is happening, you can go and pick out whichever type of fetish you have right there. There are bars specifically designed for American men, bars specifically designed for Russian men, for Chinese men, and you can tell based off of the women that are standing out front who they're catering to. And so on your passport, we need to have that signal so that immigration officers in other countries can see who's coming into their nations. And here's where I'll end. If law enforcement is being required to be an extension of DHS, of ICE, and there is a bill that was proposed this session, the session's not finished yet in the Tennessee legislature, but that would require all local law enforcement agencies to be an extension of ICE through the 287G program. If you talk to local law enforcement officers, they know, and Tommy, you can attest to this, that if you've been working so hard to build trust with the people in your community, if they're afraid, they're not going to call you. when their son is drowning in a pool.
Right.
If they're afraid that their due process is not going to be protected, they are not going to call you when they fear that their daughter is being assaulted by someone in the home. And so this is a cultural issue that has to be addressed because that is not the way that we go about policing and protecting our local communities. So that really has to change. If you guys are looking for a book to read or to report on, and this is not specifically about domestic abuse, but it's a great cultural study, anthropological study. It's called The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. It's a case study on a Hmong family in Merced, California, whose daughter had a medical emergency, but they ended up having their daughter removed from their home because of the cultural practices that they had in believing that she was connected to the spiritual world. And it's just a great study for you to just kind of see how culture impacts the way that we respond in child protection cases specifically. And I could lecture, former lecturer, I could lecture for days, but there's my quick and dirty list of policies I'd like to see changed immediately.
Thank you so much. You were so prepared. Okay, we've got about 20 minutes left for Q&A. I always alternate between in-person and online, so we'll start. Is there anybody here in the audience today? I'm going to go ahead and let Cassandra ask her question.
This question is for Lauren.
Oh, yeah. Can we get a mic? Should she use this one? Okay. I'm going to let Lindley. Lindley is our mic hero today. There you go. Yeah. If you can bring that to Cassandra there. Are they already on? They are? Okay. You should be able to just give it to her, I think.
Hello. This question is for Lauren. I come from law enforcement as well, and we were talking last night specifically about today, and you mentioned the registry. Do you know how long that registry is for? Like if you're on SOR, sexual assault registry, like there's time, like you have to report and things like that. Do you know anything about how long they're on registry, reporting or anything along those lines?
For domestic abuse specifically?
For the domestic violence registry.
This is brand new, and I'm going to be honest and say I don't know. So.
I can answer that for you.
Yeah.
I actually did a interview on this not too long ago. So it depends on how many convictions that they actually have on their record. So it's anywhere between 1 to 20 years, depending on the multiple convictions. So it's 4 or more, it's 20 years that they're on the registry. So it's 1, 5, 10, and 20. And again, I think that's one of the things that I don't know that we have done a great job of really explaining what the DV registry actually does. And it should not be used to give the victim responsibility. Well, you should have checked the registry. You should have seen that they were on the list. That's not something that should be used as accountability for a victim to know that they should have looked at the registry or to blame them in any way. And also knowing that it's not going to be a comprehensive list since it is something that is brand new. So depending on, you've got to look at the number of convictions, and that conviction has to be after a certain date. And I think about scenarios, because I've actually done the scenario with my board of if someone is arrested for domestic violence and say that first arrest is retirement, well, that's not a conviction. That's not a finding of guilt. So that's not your conviction. So you say after the time has expired, now that's expunged and dismissed. Now you've got arrest number 2. Now that's a diversion. So that's that guilty plea is held, and that's still not a conviction. So then that's expungible. Now we're on arrest number 3, and that's your first conviction. Mm-hmm. And so it's not an automatic thing. You know, also the county in which the conviction takes place, the clerk's office has 7 days to file that with the TBI. There was some not clear language in the very beginning of like how long each clerk's office had, who was designated to do that as well. So those are still some things that they're working through. And so it's a start in the right direction, but it's not going to be a comprehensive list. But it does require some of the information the SRO list does, but you know, it's still not going to be a stranger danger list, so to speak. And so, one of the things, I fear from, anytime there's anything that is enacted that you could say the victim should be responsible for their own safety, that's not what that registry is meant to be. And I think some may interpret it that way. And while that's not part of the question that you asked, for me, we have to have more offender accountability. My background is also in probation for 19 years. So I've seen it on both sides. And so there are things that we can do legislatively that increases the accountability of offenders. But there's also things that we can also do to make sure that if a victim comes forward to prosecute or to explain what's going on, that there are laws that are not in place that prevents them from coming forward, that may get them tangled up in a system that they may or may not know how to navigate. And some of our laws over the years have done that we've worked to kind of undo over the years, but there's still work to be done. There's a lot to be said for championing on the Hill and making sure that your voice is being heard. One of the things is Kat and I recently participated on Day of the Hill. And one of the things that we actually thanked a legislator for, since this is part of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, is that now a minor in the state of Tennessee has equal access to a sexual assault kit. And they don't need permission from their parents, because in those scenarios where their parents might be the abuser, they're not going to give consent for that exam. So that actually went into effect immediately on March the 18th of this year. So that's a huge deal, that a minor is able to get access to that sexual assault kit.
Any other comments from our panelists related to this question?
That law she's referring to is called Savannah's Law, is that correct?
That is correct.
And a person could have 10 convictions on their record right now, and they would not be put on the registry because they got to wait till they get to the next two.
After January 1.
So government is great, but it is slow. So please stay active on your Am I Dating the Same Man Facebook pages. That's going to be much better intel for you right now, probably.
Yes.
And any person that you find out's been arrested for domestic assault, trust me, they're not going to say, yep, I used to beat the hell out of her. No, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, man, I was framed, this was crazy, she was crazy. And that's what you're going to get. So remember that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Jessica, do we have any online questions? No? Okay. Any other questions in the room here? Yeah, Dr. King. Wait for our mic. Wait. I want to make sure people online can hear what your question is. I'll repeat it. What is your question?
You were talking about being on the Hill. Within the last couple of weeks, it was social work month, and so we went to social work day on the Hill. One of the things I was looking at, one of the things that we talked about, and we actually revised, we presented on the House Bill 1765, which was written to, if a person violates an order of protection, it changes it from that $100 fine because it's a misdemeanor, and it makes that automatically a felony offense. Not only that, but it also takes that from, if that happened to someone in a different state, which had never existed before, if they were in, South Carolina, the idea is they'll look back, if it happened in a different state, that transfers over. How do you think that's going to be helpful at all? Because what's going to happen is, supposedly, that takes that person from a $20 fine to at least 6 months in prison, in jail. Every one adds up after so many, do you think that's actually going to be helpful? That's going to move that from a misdemeanor to a felony offense if the person violates that order of protection?
I think anything stricter when it comes to order of protection is always going to be helpful. It is also dependent on each department to correctly identify that information and enter it into NCIC so that other agencies can see that information. Because sometimes that's where the problem kind of falls apart, is that other agencies aren't communicating with each other and it's not entered in the national database to know that it is active. An order of protection is good in every single state, but if it's not correctly entered in by that department, then you don't know that it exists. That's why we make sure that our survivors that we work with, as we're helping them file that order of protection, is that they have a copy. They have multiple copies of that order of protection. So they've got one in the glove box. They've gotten that maybe to the school that for the pickup list. Their job has a copy of that. They've talked to their employer about, hey, this is what my user drives. This is what he looks like. I've worked with agencies where there is a photo of someone's abuser, so that anybody that works in an office knows if that person comes in, that's an immediate call to law enforcement. And so it's really about making sure that information is entered in on the front end so that it can be properly communicated to outside agencies. And I think also when an order of protection is filed, it's also dependent on what that disposition is of that order of protection. So if our commissioners or judge review those petitions, and they are the ones that make the decision of whether it's approved or denied, and if that petition is initially denied, then that's no protection attaches. So that petition is served, but there's no protection given to the party that's seeking that. And so that can be a more dangerous situation for a victim, because now their abuser has been served with a petition. They've seen the allegations on the petition, and there's no protection. And so it's hard for law enforcement to enforce because that protection is not in place. So if it's approved, it's temporary ex parte, which means that those protections attach. So if that's removing the abuser from the residence, temporary custody of children, not harming pets, things of that nature, all of those things go into place once that's been served by law enforcement. And I will say that our law enforcement officers here locally within Rutherford County, that is my area of expertise is Rutherford County. They do a phenomenal job of getting those petitions served. Like as quickly as they hit, they are going out to serve. Any officer that's worth a grain of salt will tell you the longer that it takes a warrant to be served, that goes cold, because those people know that there is something out for them. And so they're trying to evade service, but our officers do an amazing job to make sure that those are served in a timely manner. And also, we are corresponding with our clients to let them know, hey, this was served, this is your court date. Again, talking about orders of protection and being in court with your abuser, yes, that is a very uncomfortable process for anyone. Court is as confusing as it is, but then you're asking someone to be in court with their abuser. And so the way our office operates on an order of protection is there's an advocate in court, and we also have attorneys that represent our clients on that order of protection. So they have someone that is, explaining to them what the legal process looks like and talking to that other party on their behalf. So trying to make it an uncomfortable situation more comfortable, because they have a team behind them in court, which is really important to kind of wrap your arms around that support piece when someone does go to court on an order of protection. And also in our criminal court, we have a DD coordinator that actually used to work for my agency that does a phenomenal job, as well as working with every victim that comes to court on that DD charge, to understand what that process looks like, what their options are. Talking with the district attorney's office and making sure that their voice is being heard and elevating that voice, because that's the most important thing that you can give somebody back, is their voice, especially in a court system as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to add to what Erica has shared with us?
I'm going to add to that. And I actually want to add to this from the other side of it. So as a survivor myself, I did have an order of protection. Now, that was almost 12 years ago, so it was a little bit different than how it is done now. But I want to say, for any of you guys that are in here that may know someone that has something like that, or maybe is in the process of getting that, make sure that, one, you understand what it is on their behalf so that you can help and advocate with them. Know the difference between an order of protection and a restraining order. Those are two totally different things. And the other thing is, even with an order of protection, make sure that you are contacting the police at any incident that is happening. So with my order of protection, I had my ex arrested for domestic assault, and then 45 days later, he was rearrested for stalking. During that time of being under an order of protection, he was still showing up at the bottom of my driveway at about 2 a.m, and we would catch him on the cameras. But he was always clothed differently, so you couldn't tell. I reported those incidences every single time, just so that when I went to court, I had something tangible to bring in, and it's not just word of mouth. In the court space, it is that is what they go off of, is what's tangible, which is great, and it really sucks, especially when you're trying to convey emotions and additional situations that you've been in that you are not allowed to convey. So just make sure that you understand that, and when you're having conversations with people, if you hear that they are doing that, that you are aware of how that works as well, so you can help them understand and give them a piece of advice if they're going through situations.
Oh, can you get the mic just so online people can hear? Thank you.
To tie into what you were saying, Kate, so why do you know, like, why does it take so many times for, because say like, okay, if somebody was just documenting all those things, do you know why it takes so many times to document instead of their person being just arrested? Because, you know how, like, okay, I'm documented, but before it get too late. Like, I'm done with it. I don't want anything to do with it. But you know how they say they're holding for 12 hours. But then after the 12 hours, they're out, and then they're probably stalking. So do you know why it takes so many time instead of for them to be just locked up? Or
so I think that's more of a Tommy question on the law enforcement side, but to also say what Lauren said earlier, which is the government takes forever. And what they are looking for is they are looking for adequate evidence. So in my situation, the 10 years that I was in my relationship, I did not have any evidence prior to. I only had the day of. So that is the only thing that they can talk about in court, is that case, which is extremely unhelpful, in my personal opinion, because you're not able to give the
history behind
the history behind it. So with that, what they're doing is they're taking 2% of what they've got, and they're trying to create something off of it. So it's kind of that, innocent until proven guilty, where they want to kind of wait and see. And I do hate that it works that way, simply because we do have so many situations where when someone leaves, that is the most dangerous time for them, right? And I dealt with mine on and off for 4.5 years in and out of court, and they couldn't do anything because we didn't have the physical evidence, or I couldn't get the picture of him and his face. And so unfortunately it becomes hearsay, and in any case when it comes to dealing with that, hearsay is no good because people can make up stories. So, but I still say that it's important to make sure that you are documenting it yourself, put down the dates, put down the times, put down anything that you can, and make sure that you're reporting the information, just simply because when you do have to get up on that stage like I had to, and you have to sit and look at the person that you have loved and cared for however many years, but you also know that you really do not like them as an individual, having to retell your side of the story, having to not look at them in the eye because they're going to make you uncomfortable, having things like that is very helpful to recall what you're going through, because you actually put yourself back into a fight or flight mode. It's just part of it. And so there's things like Lauren said, I think that should be done very differently in the court system that would help. But I think that that's a lot of what it is law enforcement is overwhelmed as it is. I mean, in Rutherford County, what is it, 55% of law enforcement calls are domestic violence related?
Yes, and now most of the domestic violence calls that they are going on every other call they're going on, strangulation is involved.
So it's a common issue, and so I think that there's also an overwhelm, but there's also a how do we pick out what's true and what's not true, who's exaggerating and things like that. And so that's why it's so important to have these kinds of conversations and make sure that you guys are advocating for yourself and anyone that you might have going through these situations, because it does take a community to make sure that things get done.
And I think I would also add to that, and I'm sure that Tommy's got some things to add too, is that, law enforcement is also looking at those statutory requirements, and sometimes that's a little bit harder to prove, and depending on what crime it is. I think in any situation where someone maybe doesn't feel heard by law enforcement, everybody has a supervisor, and it's really finding that person to really kind of listen and I know I've talked to this person, but I really need someone to sit down with me and lay out all of this evidence and figure out where can I best proceed. But also, there might be some precludements that law enforcement will be able to travel down based on the statutory requirements as well. But, I would recommend, anytime that, and I'm usually not that person to be like, hey, go talk to the supervisor. But in a situation where someone doesn't feel like they're being heard and they have all this evidence, sometimes you do have to escalate that to someone who may have a little bit more knowledge and expertise. We have a lot of new officers and a lot of new advocates, and everybody is new at their job, and so sometimes they don't know what they don't know, and maybe it's elevating that to someone else that maybe has that knowledge and expertise to make sure of how you can proceed, and maybe they can give you better tips on how to collect the evidence so that it can be used in court and things like that, because sometimes that's part of the issue too, is that you think you're collecting what you need to collect, but from a statutory requirement, there's other things that need to be met as well.
Tommy, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to wrap it up, okay?
I'll be less than that.
You got it.
Stalking is a pattern of events, so you have to have at least two. Have to have at least two events. Now, in the real world, you'll show up. The officer will show up, and says, "All right," the first time said, "Would you like me to call him and tell him to not do this?" And sometimes the victim says, "That might make him mad." And he could, no, they'll ask, "Will that make him mad?" "I don't know." I said, "But I can call him, tell him we got him here, know he's here. Do you want me to call him?" And so it's always iffy as to whether they want us to say that. And when I've done that, I says, if it happens again, if I see her again in this neighborhood, I'll take out a warrant for your arrest. Now, the Daniel Green stalking, man, there were several incidents, and thank goodness she documented before she called me. So I had all this evidence there, and it was very easy once we found out who put the tracking device to go out and take out the warrants. But stalking is a pattern, and you need at least two separate instances. And sometimes judges consider a whole day one instance, which is, I don't get that, but that's what they do. They'll, he might run, but the whole day. Well, no, that was a continuing thing. So.
One more question. It's going to be quick.
She's scary, isn't she?
So, I know you said that now they have like sexual assault kits. Mm-hmm. So in class we talk about how if you are raped, you shouldn't take showers. So is the DNA different from the sexual assault kits, just in case someone doesn't know that they don't supposed to take showers and they do take a shower? So how would you collect that evidence?
I mean, so obviously most nurses will tell you the quicker that someone can go to get a sexual assault exam, the better. Now, it's not uncommon that someone has showered, used the bathroom, things like that, so some evidence that automatically kind of like flushes out of your system. That still doesn't preclude them from collecting that evidence, but again, it's sooner the better. Best practices used to be that after a sexual assault, the kit needs to be done within 5 days. There are now studies from the TBI that show up to 7 days that things can be collected. Now, obviously, it's also going to depend on that sexual assault. So was that an oral assault? Was it a vaginal assault? Was it an anal assault? All of that time frame factors in as well. But, most people after their sexual assault, the first thought is, oh, I need to go to the hospital and get a sexual assault kit. You're in trauma and you're trying to figure out what your next steps are. Most of the times when we meet somebody at the hospital, it's because they have told a friend and their friend has said, you're going to the hospital. And you've kind of been drug in there to do that exam and you're still trying to figure out. So the nurse will ask those questions so that they kind of know evidence wise, but just because someone has showered does not preclude them from getting a sexual assault exam. Now, when someone does report for a sexual assault exam, your whole body is evidence, and so a lot of the nurses are not going to do a lot of like touching, things like that, because they don't want to mix their DNA with DNA that could be on your system. And also, they're going to, get your DNA as well from that kit, so they can distinguish any DNA that they may find. Now, there's no guarantee on a sexual assault exam that there's going to be DNA that's found. But, I would always recommend going to get a sexual assault exam, because you're also going to be treated for any STIs. You're going to get a panel of testing to make sure that you're physically okay and get treatment on the offset that something could have been sexually transmitted as well. But, I do recognize that that's not a comfortable exam. and it's very evasive, and most nurses that are trained, they understand the trauma that they are, that the client is going through, and they're going to be as gentle as possible as through that process, and as less evasive as they possibly can be through that process as well.
Thank you guys so much. Why don't we give a round of applause to our panelists? I just want to acknowledge that they're out there doing the important work. Like, they spent time out of their day to come. I really appreciate all of you coming and listening and asking them good questions. We have warm food out in the hallway, so I encourage you to continue chatting with them. Please do a walk and talk so we can all go get that food. I also want to encourage you to consider supporting some of the work that's being done.
Yeah.
So you can donate directly to the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center. You can buy tickets to their annual fundraising event, show your till, or send it to someone who might want to go if you can't go. That's on April 30th. And then, of course, this is the QR code. Please give some feedback. This is how I get money to do this event every year and get extra credit for your courses. I have one more on April 16th, same time, same place, about elder abuse, which is something we all could learn a lot more about. Just one more note on allergens. They've been labeled, but Airmark said they cannot ensure no cross-contamination has occurred. So please be mindful of that. Thank you again so much for coming, and sign in as you leave if you haven't.
Andy, where did Andy go?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
I asked her, she said that was fine. Actually, I was like, do you have pins? She's like, no, it's fine. I'm like, okay, good. I'm like, I didn't bring anything. I got it. I was not prepared, apparently.
I know, I almost just like sat on it while we.
I know.